This meeting is being recorded.
You see the screen share?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you see? You don't see Queen Mother, do you?
I don't see her. It's really more a matter of space, but like, what, honey? It's mostly a matter of space.
I'm sorry?
He's recording.
We are beginning if you're joining us.
Holy Night Concord Convocation.
Yeah, well, try it again because we're waiting for you. We're all here if you can. Good. Yeah. Yes. Good. Hello, Moira. And Kirk, welcome. And Joseph, greetings from nice to see you way over there over the seas.
Hello, Stuart. Wonderful to be here.
We're waiting for Queen Mother, friends. She's at a young 88. She's much better with this technology than I, but she's having a bit of complications. I'll do it right now. Yes. Yes. Okay, just 1 second.
What, honey? Wondering what we should like. Yeah. What would you like? Do you want to have a little something before we go? No, I think we should go. Okay. Here. All righty.
So friends, while we wait for Queen Mother, who will open with a prayer, let's go around and people simply introduce themselves briefly, if you will, and say where you are joining us from. So perhaps if we start in the upper left, Stephanie, on my screen.
Greetings on this very special day. So lovely to see all of you.
We need to speak up louder. Do you want to say that again?
Sorry. Greetings on this very special day. My name is Stephanie Georgia. I'm mostly from California, and I'm currently on my way back to serving in Bulgaria.
Thank you. Going across, Christian on the right.
Christian Shermer, Concord, California.
Thank you. Carl.
Carl Flicht, Fremont, California.
Thank you. And John and Scott.
John McManus from Philmont, New York.
Great. And John Root.
be able to unmute. Oh, there we go. I'm in a little town called Petersham in Massachusetts.
Welcome. And Joel.
Joel Wendt. I'm in central Massachusetts in Paxton, just outside Worcester.
Welcome, Joel. Andrew, we'd love to see you if possible. There we are.
Andrew Williams, Jr., Los Angeles, California.
Great. Joseph?
Joe Proskauer. I'm in Galloway in Scotland.
Great, Joe. Moira?
Moira Crum. I live in Philmont, New York, and I'm currently in Western New York outside of Buffalo.
Welcome. Kirk?
Kirk Mills. I'm in Paonia, Colorado, which is about 230 miles west of Denver.
You, Kirk. Welcome. And Carol, how good to see you.
Yes, hello everybody. Carol Nickel, and I'm in central Minnesota. So happy to be a part of all of this.
Wonderful. So, Queen Mother. Queen Mother Bernice Atchison is the co-chair of the Center for American Studies. And as some of you have heard in prior conversations, friend Rudolf Steiner spoke about two Michael streams. One of wisdom. I'm going to hit the recording just a moment. Thank you. One.
We're heading up to Alicia's.
So we're
heading up to Alicia's.
Okay.
Okay.
Can people go on mute?
Later.
Can people go on mute?
I love you.
I love you too.
Okay. So starting once again, friend Rudolf Steiner spoke about two Michael streams that are, in my understanding, are akin to the shepherds and the kings. One, the stream of knowledge that I would suggest is to be found, among other places, at the Concord School of Philosophy and Literature, which began in the year 1879 and ran for a decade. And the other school of devotion, and that is what Queen Mother is a representative of. She's an offspring of the initiate George WashingtonCarver, and that stream is related to Tuskegee, Alabama, where Booker T. Washington spoke of my work at Tuskegee was always of a threefold nature. And Tuskegee was conceived in the year 1879. So in this work, and Joel, maybe you could go on mute. Joel, is it possible to go on mute? So we don't have the background noise. So this work that's behind this convocation seeks to bring together these two Michael streams. Queen Mother has just concluded over 20 years, virtually single-handedly, in her defeat of the United States Department of Agriculture on behalf of 66,000 Black farmers of Mother Earth. The battle isn't entirely over, but at least outwardly they have been granted the justice they seek, and now the devil's in the details. But be that as it may, Queen Mother, thank you for being with us once again. And when you're ready, let us begin with an opening prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. And we welcome all of you esteemed minds to the Center for American Studies at Concord. It is such a blessing to be in the midst of all of you. And it is also humbling because it's been a long journey, a long road to get to where we are today. And at this time, because of the call of God, we will clear our minds and we will bow our heads. Most holy and righteous God, we bow before thee in the humblest way that we know how, knowing that we're not worthy, but that because of your grace and your mercy that has trumped the law, you allow us to be together today. And in the midst of these, we commit our strength, we commit our hope, and you have reached down and called each one of us by name. Lord, I'm listening because you've opened doors that I could not open. You've been my strength, you've been my peace, and I won't complain. You've been faithful. You've been a good God. You've made me strong. When the storms were breaking, you helped me to depend on your name, to have the courage to endure. When my faith was weak, you made me strong. Lord, we are dependent on you. So we ask you right now to guide us, to lead us, to allow us to come together with one mind, sharing information with an open heart, knowing that each one of us is connected to the other. And in that, we will complete the cycle of this world of justice, peace, hope, and tranquility as we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Queen Mother. And I want to also introduce and honor another trustee of the Center for American Studies, Andrew Williams. Can you make yourself visible? Steve Berman and I, we were discussing the fate of our Black brothers and sisters, and he said that their path has been truly that of the Stations of the Cross. Dr. King said, unearned suffering is redemptive. And can we have a truly civilized civilization without a people who recognize that and bear that unearned suffering with a kind of graciousness and openness of heart that I find in this sister Bernice, a trustee, and this brother Andrew, a trustee. And Andrew, I'd like to ask if you would share with them what you shared with me, the fate of your great-great-grandfather, so they could have a sense, or your great-great-grandfather, excuse me, I'm not sure all the greats, but his trials and tribulations, so we can bring him and your people more fully into this gathering.
Thank you, Stuart, and greetings to everyone here. I feel very privileged to be amongst you, and I certainly thank you, Stuart, for embracing me as your brother. My great-great-grandfather's story is one that ties together strings from our Native American heritage as well as my African heritage and my Irish heritage of all things. But it was he, as a sharecropper on the plantation in Georgia, I'm from Macon, Georgia, that worked diligently, as did others who you may know that after slavery was ended, many of the enslaved people were then repurposed, so to speak, as laborers in a sharecropping system that did not provide wages all the time, but in many cases provided opportunities for the workers to earn their part of the income or part of the results of their harvesting of the food, etc. There was scheduled payments, if you would, at the end of every cycle, whether that be of the balance that's left from the monies that were drawn or not. And on this particular occasion, my great-great-grandmother, who was a Creek Indian, Tuskegee Creek Indian, and my and she was also of the Irish lineage. Her One of her foreparents was from Ireland, but she was ill, and he was waiting for his pay so that he could get medicine for her. She had been ill for quite some time, but they had worked throughout the harvest system. And lo and behold, it came time for the pay, 5 o'clock on a Friday. But the farmer, I won't say master, but the farmer, kept them waiting. And all this time he was very anxious to get the monies, little that it was, to be able to buy the medicine for his wife. And the time went by, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. And he became more and more anxious, and he crossed a line. He actually approached the house farm and knocked on the door and pleaded for his payment in order to get the money for his wife's medicine. But the line that he crossed was at a time when the owner of the farm decided, well, it was time for an example. And my great-great-grandfather was that example. He was beaten and then hung and left there as an example of the unbroken rule. Don't speak until you're spoken to. And as a result of his death, my great-great-grandmother died. And so the strings came together for me on April the 4th of 1968 with the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I've been reading since I was very young and buying my comic books and also newspapers from a neighborhood pharmacist. And the same woman, white woman, that I've been buying my books and newspapers from all those years, she cautioned me and warned me to stop reading so much and stop trying to talk so proper, or I'd end up dead like that nigger king. I had no clue I had no clue about what this meant. And so I asked my mother, and she went back and she chastised the woman and had her to apologize to me. But then we had what's called the talk. Not about police brutality, but in my case, about how to survive in this world that my mother had been so moved as to try to abort me. But when I survived, she dedicated my life to God. And so she told me that at one time, all people on earth had come from one place. We were all one family. And that just because these people who had come from another part of the world, Europe, to this part of the world where our own lineage was here first, and they were killed, and then we were enslaved. And at that time, Martin Luther King represented a change, a shift to a time when we would all be equal. But she believed that there was a fear on behalf of those whites that were we ever to really achieve equality with them, or even if we were connected to all the non-white people around the world, there are more of us than them, so to speak, that they believed that we would treat them the way that they had treated us. And so they were afraid that I couldn't hate them or the Native Americans because, as I told you, all of their bloodline runs in my bloodline. And so my first task was to survive. And my second task was find a way to reconnect our human family. So I come to you as a journeyman. When I was 50 years old, in April 24th of 2008, I shut down my offline life.
Andrew, you've gone mute. We don't hear you, brother. We don't hear you. I don't hear you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. You shut down your...
Yeah, I shut down my offline life. Up to that point, I've been working as a paralegal for an attorney, but his business was wiped out. I've been working for this one client for 10 years. But at the same time, I was also living another life. I was involved in heavily embroiled in the crack cocaine endemic here in Los Angeles. But on my 50th birthday, I decided I would shut everything down. I went cold turkey after 18 years of living a life of hedonism, and made a decision that spend the next 50 years doing what my mama told me to do, which is, now that I survived, find a way to reconnect our human family. So you'll find me, Andrew Williams Jr., as a matter of fact, Ambassador Andrew Williams Jr. I was one of the first Facebook ambassadors. And so I've done my work over the past years since then to build a global network, a contact for people that align with the cause that I care about. So I thank you, Stuart Sinclair Weeks, for allowing me to become involved with the work there in Concord. And for my trip there in 2023, when I was one of those witnesses of the municipality of Concord, for the first time ever raising the Juneteenth flag alongside their city flag to signify this out of many one unity. And I've traced the history from Concord to Los Angeles through Ellen Garrison Clark, who was herself there, born in Concord, but traveled throughout the country to end up here on the West Coast. So I've been very much involved and intend to do what I can to try to reconnect the family through that journey and through my efforts with the Center for American Studies at Concord. So this is the first time I've been involved with these 12 days of Christmas with you, anthroposophists, and I welcome the opportunity to learn more as I go along. So thank you very much, Stuart.
Andrew, thank you for not only telling the story of your great-grandfather and great-grandmother, but also for telling your own story, for sharing your own story. Andrew is also part of this stream of devotion. Before we go, friends, to the subject for today, and I'm grateful that Joel is with us because we'll be turning to Carl Stegman and his impulse. And Joel, we only see the top of your head, at least I only see the top of your head, be that as it is, thank you. But before we go there, I want to also say a further word about Queen Mother. Queen Mother has buried 5 of her own children. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5. Because they are part and parcel of the Black race. And her motto has been, don't be bitter, be better. She raised herself. Her mother was killed in front of her. She really never knew her father at the beginning. So she raised herself on grass and crumbs of bread. She taught herself to read with menu diners. And she went on to become appointed by Governor Wallace as the first Black woman jury commissioner. And at a graduation with Governor Wallace, where she and Governor Wallace were invited to speak to a high school class, there on stage, Governor Wallace in his wheelchair, he had by that time realized why he had been brought to his knees, and he was repenting. And on stage in front of the audience, Queen Mother was moved to turn to Governor Wallace and say, Governor Wallace, why didn't you allow my children to go to the same school as your children? And Governor Wallace looked up to her and he said, Bernice, that was my job. That is to represent those who voted him into office, and Black people couldn't vote. And Bernice looked at him long and long, and then she said something very simple. She said, I understand. Imagine when we can grant understanding to another, what that leads to, what that can lead to when our hearts and minds are open. and she became Governor Wallace's mother confessor. So before we transition to today, and again, I'm very grateful, Joel, you're with us. Queen Mother, do you want to add anything to what's been said by Andrew and what I've mentioned about yourself before we go more formally into this day's offering?
Yes, Mr. Stewart, I appreciate the fact that you have given me this great opportunity. Andrew and I have somewhat a similar black background, and in that God has reached down and connected us in ways that people don't understand, with love and friendship. We're able to talk to each other and to get an understanding of why God has opened the door to us in this manner, why we have suffered in the manner that we have suffered, connecting the future with the present and the past. It's a continued journey, and it's not over. It's still hard for us, even though you can't see it on the surface. It is there. We still are subject to some of those old rules that are quaint, but we endure by the grace of God because we are not alone anymore. We have struggled to educate ourselves. We have struggled to build alliances. We have struggled to build coalitions. Our job is to do what we can for humanity and set an example. And if it causes us to lose our life, so be it. We have been willing to step in the opening and to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for humanity. God has been good to us, but He's also been harsh. We have felt the lash of the whip, even though it is not seen as a whip today. We do not have, in many cases, what we need to aid and assist in the way that need to be aided and assisted in our country. But yet we can send millions of dollars to other countries. We can provide whatever is needed for other countries. And we can't provide for ourselves. We can't even feed ourselves. And because I work with FSA and USDA, mostly contesting some of the things that they have done, even though the laws is on the book, they don't go by the law. They feel like they feel like I do not have the right to question their law. They say, well, this is ink on paper. So what is the Constitution? Is it just ink on paper too? But we, as a people that has come together to be united, to fulfill the prophecy of the Bible, are coming together realizing that we are all God's people. And in that, we all must serve each other. We cannot choose a pick whether or not we're going to serve black, white, green, or purple, because God has no color. And in this Center for American Studies, and in my study for doctorate degree, I have learned so much more than I could have ever learned had I not been given this opportunity. I'm truly grateful that you all have supported me in that facet and allowed me to be able to achieve. I have worked in many facets. I worked 13 and a half years as a jury commissioner in the law. I worked 8 years as a registrar, sometimes knowing that we were compromised. I have worked 32 years as a critical caregiver. I do tracheotomies, I do gunshot wounds, deep burns, deep sore wounds, and homeopathic. I grow my own herbs. I use those herbs to aid and assist in many situations. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I am just a servant of God, willing to give of myself, to give of my time, and to do the very best I can to aid and assist the Center for American Studies, that we may grow it into a better school, uncommon school, where those that are denied education can receive that education. Thank you.
Thank you, Queen Mother. And let me invite, before we turn to Joel, and we have Christian too, who has a connection with the impulse of Carl Stegman, and others may as well. Let me invite, no, please no one feel obliged, but if anybody has any comments they wish to offer to what Queen Mother and Andrew have shared, you're welcome to do so. Stephanie, you began to say something I heard. Any comments people may have to what's been offered by these two, this brother and sister, are welcome.
Stephanie would say a big thanks. I'm very grateful to both of you for your contributions to the fabric of America, the United States.
Thank you, Stephanie. So, friends, thank you for taking that in. I know you all well enough to know that's what you've done. As we transition to today's gathering, and Kienda was going to be one of the speakers. I got a call from her about 45 minutes ago, and she has a severe attack of, what's that, nerve pain, sciatica or sciatica. Sciatica. So she's unfortunately not able to be with us. She was going to be speaking about René Corrido and about Dietrich von Osten, her connection with them on earth and in the heavens. And then we're going to turn to Carl Stegman. So that's what we will focus on. And I want to transition us just by saying that it is this medium of the technology that brings us together. And we use it. Even though we wouldn't use our mother and our father and our children and our siblings, hopefully, we use this technology. And there's a lot of suffering behind the technology. Ursula Burkhardt, a blind Swiss anthroposophist, described this, one with a real inner vision of what happens when people use something and don't give back in consciousness and in gratitude. And she talked about how the elemental beings are as if chained, imprisoned, that are forced to serve this technology that brings us together. So before I invite Joel to open up, let's take a moment and look at our computers and look at our phones for those who wish to, that is bringing us together, and perhaps offer a bit of compassion to those spirits that are serving this convocation. Joel, old friend, you who've had perhaps the closest connection to the Center for American Studies over many years, a warm welcome to speak to either the theme, which is what is our most decisive, dispassionate, enlightening critique of our own life and labors that we might offer in the spirit of self-knowledge, in the spirit of sharing with those to come what we've learned on this path of knowledge with friend Rudolf Steiner. And also, and no one should feel obliged with these themes, but also, welcome Bernhard, how you see this related to the work with Carl and what that work was about that some would say was co-opted by the impulse that was behind Rene Corrido, God bless him. And then we'll invite Chris to offer any thoughts and anybody else. So the floor is yours, Joel. Proceed as you wish.
Muted.
You have me on the edge of my seat. Are you muted or not? You are muted. You are muted. I can call you up, Joel, and you can speak over the phone, and I can put the phone to the screen. Shall I give you a call? You're muted still. We heard you before when your beloved spouse was giving you a kiss goodbye. You were loud and clear then. And I can almost read your lips, but I don't hear a sound.
There he goes.
Can you hear a sound now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, no. I ran into Rudolf Steiner in 1978 through his books. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area, which was full of all of these master magicians and spiritual people for a couple of decades. And I was immediately attracted to his work. The odd part was for 2 years while I was studying Rudolf Steiner, I never ran into anything advertising his work. Now, Berkeley was a place where, and San Francisco was a place where people put posters up for every possible spiritual researcher there was. There seemed to be no evidence of these folks. I actually had an event where I was saw a link for some Christian community priests to speak in San Francisco. So that was my first encounter with practicing anthroposophists. And eventually, shortly after that, I became friends with William Bento. And William gave me a copy of, well, I want to get the title right here. The Other America by Carl Stegman.
Amen.
And two volumes, and I read that. And I was sort of very interested in meeting him, but I was kind of tied by circumstances to the San Francisco Bay Area, jobs and stuff. But Providence had other things in mind, and the net result was that I ended up moving to Sacramento because my daughter wanted to get into the Waldorf school. And that's when I ran into Carl and the Emerson Study Group and spent a lot of time with them the whole time I was there. They were like I don't know, my folk, I suppose you could say. And I don't know. Let's see. The Anthroposophical Society is full of imperfect people like everything else. We do a lot of goofy things that maybe would be better if we sat back a little bit. But all the same, we each have an individual experience of life and of the person that was once known as Rudolf Steiner. I met him in a later incarnation and actually had a conversation with him in the spirit one day. And that happened at his initiative, the Steiner spirit, where he wanted to thank me for having recognized him during the culmination as Harvey Bornfield. Now, if you want to go to Amazon and look up my books, you can find a copy of Harvey's contributions to the ARC internet group. It's called Silent Passage. I met him 3 times, and none of us who were on the ARC had any idea that we were the culmination, this meeting between the Platonists and the Aristotelians, or that Harvey had been Steiner. That all of that understanding would have made us lamed because we would have had certain expectations about ourselves. So we just wandered in and out, and we had some very incredible people that were on the group, and it was rather remarkable. I guess the main thing I could tell the story of Carl standing up and creating the impulse that failed, which was Stuart can do it and cover it as well. I'm not going to stick it in here because to do it right, you have to talk about a bunch of different things. In my own development, one of the first things that I ran into was Steiner's works on GA2 and GA4, Goethe's theory of knowledge and the philosophy of freedom. And I'd already done thinking of my own on this subject for another long story, but basically I was very excited, and I just devoted myself to those 2 books. And one of the things I discovered while I was doing that was that you don't get anywhere talking about it. You have to read maybe a phrase and then look at yourself. The Steiner spirit actually said that people weren't reading the books in the right way. You have to take the indication and then self-observe, and slowly you build up from the guidance, especially in GA2, which Owen Barfield called the most significant book. The greatest book Steiner ever wrote that's never read, or something like that. Anyway, so that followed with a lot of development and thinking, and eventually I got to understand the idea of phenomenology. And because my life at that time had been through the Vietnam War and all the rest of that, like a lot of other people, I was flummoxed, or I didn't know what to do with what had gone on. And so I was looking for answers as to why that went on. And with the idea of phenomenology, I began to just practice that, which is you describe. So I spent several decades trying to describe the social order. And eventually I got to a point where I published what might be called my masterpiece, which is called The Art of God, an Actual Theory of Everything, where I take the religious question. No, let's get this right.
Take your time.
Yeah. I took the religious question and turned it into a theory. That's the way I stated it. Theory of God, a theory of this, a theory of that. And the idea was then to compare that theoretical structure to the theoretical structure that we were getting through modern physics and stuff like that. And the point was to demonstrate, I mean, it's over 300 pages, the book is, but very carefully show where some goofiness arose in science and different ways out of it. And the fact is that we can see the divine in everything. Anyway, so one of the points of that was the idea that the individual human being is the main point of existence. The stuff we get in the news that gets us so riled up, Trump did this, those people did that, that's sort of secondary blowback from a fundamental process that goes on in the social order that the Steiner spirit described as the consciousness soul age. In Theosophy, he talks about the particular time in which we live as being related to the generation out of our own inner life of the good and the true. Now, in my work and thinking about that phenomenologically, I began to realize that each individual biography was holy and sacred, and that what the powers were able to do through their adjustments of karma and inspiration directly to the people that we have karma with and all the rest of that, they help us have an individualized experience. And in effect, the God is distributed because we have a capacity to make a choice. You know, I could jump in a car and find Stuart and shoot him with a shotgun. I have a choice. And that choice in Hermetic science is called the Akasha principle, or the primary principle behind everything else, which is the first choice, and then the results start to happen. So in the case of the biography, you have people who have these situations that they have to endure because of their need. And in order for the individual to be put in a place where they must, out of the dynamics of their biography, try to work out of themselves what's true and what's good, requires that their biography be surrounded by chaos. Because if there's not enough chaos, the dynamics of the biography will define all these things for the individual. They'll tell him what to think and why and whatever. And in order to be placed back on his own nature by the biography, he has to go through these trials. And so the world is full of 8+ billion people going through individual sacred development in their biography that allows them to make choice. And there's all kinds of weird stuff that phenomenologically I could go into. I'll just give one example and then shut up and maybe ask some questions that maybe people had. One of the things that's happened recently is artificial intelligence. And there are a lot of reasons to feel that that's a bad thing. And the curious thing to me in thinking about it in social life was that people were becoming aware that material that they were receiving as input through the electronic systems could be massaged and could be false. So in this way, the existence of the AI riddle pushes people again into themselves to try to figure out what the true and the good is. And anyway, that's an introduction to me. And Carl, who had a lot of influence on me. I have, let's see, I have Carl, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Forward in the Future, Mother America, 2 copies, 2 volumes, the third call. The double by Richard Smith is good. Carl Stegman on Emerson, the Forerunner of the Future. Okay, so, sorry.
Joel, thank you. So may I ask this? Would you please, to the best of your ability, and this is what Yenda would have done in part, and also Nancy Poor, who's, as we all know, who's older, so she's been tied into matters with her family. But would you, and Steve Berman, who we spoke with earlier, who sends his warm greetings, who's one of the original students with Carl. He is consciously quietly with us, not through this medium, but very much with us. Steffi and I spoke with Steve earlier, about half an hour before we began. Would you, Joel, be good enough to set the scene, what happened with Carl and Rene in your understanding, and then we'll transition to Christian Sherm, who played a key role in the further unfolding of the story. So Joel, can you paint for us a picture of what happened with this impulse Carl was bearing to work out of the genius of this land, to really connect with those on whose shoulders we stood, and what happened in Sacramento?
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. And what I can add briefly, Joel, what I can add briefly is Carl was part of a study group we had in Dornoch on America. And he was also connected with the work we were doing in Concord that Andrew was originally involved with, that Joel became connected with, and that really many others who are on this call have also been part of. So the question is, how can we stand on our own feet, think our own thoughts, work out of our own genius as people of the United States of Columbia?
You seem to ask for one thing and then you change the subject.
Yeah,
You want to try again for what you want me to talk about?
I'm sorry, I did just that, Joel. My apologies. So if you could set the scene, what happened in Sacramento with Carl's impulse for America, the other America, with Rene, God bless him, that Kienda was going to speak to. What happened? And then after you set the stage, we'll go to Chris and invite his comments.
Okay, so I think the year was 1977, but could be inaccurate. Anyway, there was a meeting of the Faust branch in Sacramento, Fair Oaks, and Carl stood up in this meeting. And if you haven't met him, this is like an imposing person. Okay, if he stands up and wants to say something, everybody's going to listen. And what he said was that he had this inspiration, which I think came to him via inspiration in this moment, while this circle was thinking about what to do, that something should be created where people would be introduced to anthroposophy, and also where the study of the spiritual America could take place. So this impulse was then taken up by all kinds of people in the Fair Oaks area. One very interesting, I'd say acquaintance, but anyway, his response to this possibility that there was going to be an American Studies school, he went to England to study, I think, with Francis Edmonds, because he wanted to complete his understanding of mathematics and projective geometry and stuff like that. He was an accountant that worked for the state of California. And so he took a year off. Now, when he came back, there was no more American studies. There was no introduction to Anthroposophy. There was a Waldorf teacher training school. And I had a very interesting experience. I was trying to practice. I had a desk where I sat in Citrus Heights in Sacramento, and I saw it as an altar, and I would go there and do meditative exercises. And I sat there one day, and the meeting hadn't happened yet. That was this annual meeting that was going to be the big anniversary for the Waldorf school people. But anyway, I was trying to create in my mind a picture of what had been conveyed to me through Carl and the other people that had been involved in the beginning of this experience. And I was using the imagination to form the pictures that I could of the idea. And then I was gifted with an imagination. Now, a lot of times people don't understand when they think about somebody who has spiritual experiences. I'm not saying this is true for anybody that's here, but in our lexicon of anthroposophy, we have imagination with a capital, inspiration with a capital, and intuition with a capital, as distinguished from ordinary imagination, inspiration, and intuition. So when you actually have one with the capital, there's another being present. It's not just you. So when I was recreating this story, I was touched by this being who wanted to take my riddle and add some knowledge to that. And I ended up with this picture of two figures, and well, actually there were 8 figures altogether. I think that's right. Anyway, so it's hard to describe a picture like this because it shimmers, okay, because it's live. And so you don't get to really work with it so much as you just let it wash over you. So I was filled with this image, and there were a left side to the image, which was colored blue, and a right side to the image, which was colored red. And in the left side image was a human being who had the visage of Rene Carrito, and he was 6 feet off the ground. And beneath him were 3 Americans who were also pulled up off the ground by their following his lead, and which was taking them away from their own soul life, which was sort of a common thing that happened during those years. And on the right side was a Rene Carrito, Carl image. His group was all on the ground. There was kind of like a half-built brick wall, and Carl was sitting on it in the posture of Rodin, the thinker, and there were an additional 3 Americans leaning against the unbuilt American Studies, or laying in grass and stuff like that. So that was an image that I got. And one of the things about those is you can go back and call them forth and get more. So at one point I realized that the blue had to do with the fact that the anthroposophical impulse in Europe is largely artistic. And the reason that the Americans were read was because they're mostly in the will. And so you have this conflict between people who want to will and people who are drawn to artistic. And because of this really weird thing that happened in together with this, I want to shut up and let me just tell one more weird story, I think. Years ago, I had a library in my house called the Cadmus Library, and we were living in New Hampshire. And it was a private library that had been collected by local people in the study groups and stuff. And so we had all these books that could be lent out locally. And amongst all this stuff was a dozen cardboard boxes. And what was in these cardboard boxes was copies of all the newsletters from the very beginning, when the Anthroposophical movement came to the Americas and people started writing stuff and publishing it. So it was just there. And over a long time, because I didn't really have the time for it, I went through page by page. I didn't read it all, but I was looking for a particular subject because my intuition had led me to a particular problem. And the subject I was wanting to find was it ever anywhere discussed that the soul life of the European and the soul life of the American were totally different? So what happened in the beginning is this fact, which is very clear. You read Steiner, there's no doubt about it. In fact, in my book, American Anthroposophy, you can, I'm on Amazon. Anyway, I lost that. We have this situation now. The way I talk about it now, and I nag people a little bit. Sometimes I've been on meetings and I stick it in there, and everybody gets upset with me. And I say, look, there's an Anthroposophical Society in America, but it is not of America. It's the impulse brought by the Europeans who came here to. One guy said it, which I think is some true. All the jobs were filled. And if you wanted to do anthroposophy and be in charge of something, you had to go to America, where everybody was waiting to be taught what the Europeans seemed to think was their soul life. So they tried to teach us our soul life, and a whole lot of screw ups came from that. And so we're in a situation where we are right now, which is
which transitions us, Joel, to Chris.
Yeah, I'm losing an important point. Maybe it'll show up again.
It'll come back, I trust. It transitions us to Chris. And I want to show this image once again, and also introduce another person who's with us, who's not only Mohawk and Iroquois, but a man of great wisdom and insight. And on the 12th day, on Epiphany, we will invite representatives of all of the countries in the Americas, including Canada, where Joel is, where Daryl is, but not as part of Canada, of his own nation, to speak to the genius of their countries, of their lands. So Joel, after, if you can hear me, after Chris has picked up Joel's thread, Daryl, I'm going to invite you to offer some words. What you can perhaps see on the screen is what's emerging unbeknownst out of this work. And that is, at the beginning of this year, I had communicated to Mary Adams and the council members that we have the wrong name. It is not the Anthroposophical Society in America, it's the Anthroposophical Society in the United States of America. And not only that, but I have friends in the other countries in the Americas who are not pleased with this further expression of a kind of hegemony and unconscious imperialism. And if the whole is in the part, if the oak is in the acorn, if the story is in the title, we don't even have the title correct, what are we doing? And there's been no response. And so my response, and I don't mean to unduly implicate any of you in my affairs, but this is my response. Whether it's time to establish the Anthroposophical Society or Fellowship of the United States of Columbia, as in the name of our nation's capital, the District of Columbia, as in the name of our first national anthem, Hail Columbia, as in the name of the Columbia Tammany Society, of which Ben Franklin and our founding fathers and mothers were members, and as in the name of the Columbia Space Shuttle that just happened to go down over President Bush's home state, Texas, as he was leading us to war in the Gulf. Columbia comes from the Irish and Italian words column, which means dove. Not warrior, but dove. So this is what's simply unfolding in response in part to the events at Harvard. And I say this as one whose grandfather was an overseer of Harvard, whose father went to Harvard. I was destined to go there. I went instead to Emerson College. So from a personal perspective, I share that insight. But this brings us back to what Joel said and what Chris has been invited to speak to, but Kenda would have spoken to were she with us. And that is, what are we doing here in the United States? Are we working out of the genius of our land? Are we honoring the shoulders upon which we stand? Or are we copying something from a grand culture, but that is not all American? So Chris, if you wish in any way to take up these threads, and I ask Chris because he was the one who affected the transition, and Chris will go into this in some detail, when the Rudolf Steiner College could not continue. There was someone who had to play the role of effecting a proper transition, and that was Chris. And now his son, in fact, is carrying it on in its new guise. So Chris, a warm welcome. Thank you for being with us. The floor is yours in whatever way you want to take it.
Look, I would like to have a question answered before I can continue. There was a mention that Joel mentioned the failure of the impulse or the activity. And before I can pick up the threads, it will need to be placed on the table here, either by you, Stuart, or by Joel, 2 or 3 or 4 sentences about that failure.
Wonderful question. Joel, I defer to you, and then I will pick up the thread.
I don't even understand the question. So you answer it your way, and that may help me understand the question better, okay?
So I think, Chris, tell me if I'm hearing you correctly. Are you saying that in the what Joel depicted, this is intuition he had with Rene above the earth and drawing people up with him, and Carl, like Rodin, sitting there solidly, that were you saying, Joel, that Carl brought an impulse of the other America to really grasp what our work was and what our destiny was as Americans, and all Americans, and Carl understood not just Anglos, and that failed? Is that what you were saying? Or would you put it in other words?
Well, I would say there was not failure as much as theft.
If I might intervene, I think what Joel was saying was the original impulse. And I wasn't there, I don't know. But I think Joel was trying to say Carl Stegman stood up and gave an impulse. And I think what Joel's saying is that impulse only manifested as far as a Waldorf teacher training. That's what I heard, Joel. And I think you called that a failure, that it didn't reach the fullness of what Carl Stegman had wanted.
Thank you.
But my understanding was Carl Stegman didn't envision a Waldorf training institute. He envisioned something quite different. And Joel, I don't want to put any further words in your mouth, but I think theft goes more in that direction. And Kienda would have spoken to that out of her connection with Renee, but she's not with us at the moment. So was the impulse that Carl had, Joel, did it include a Waldorf Teachers Training Institute, which is what unfolded?
No. It was the introductory, general introductory to anthroposophy. Not specialized in one of the daughter movements.
So Chris, what I would add, and then anybody else feel free to chime in, Joseph, Carl, anybody else, what I would add from myself is from my conversations with Carl, is that the question was, how do we, as Emerson said in his American Scholar address, we must stand on our own feet, we must think our own thoughts, we must work out of the genius of our land and honor those on whose shoulders we in fact stand. Friend Rudolf Steiner had said, had he introduced anthroposophy in America, he would have done it on the works of Emerson. And Emerson himself said that his works were cosmopolitan. One can't understand Emerson without Thoreau, without the Alcotts, without Hawthorne, without our Joan of Arc, Margaret Fuller. So, Christian, does that speak enough to your query? Can you build on that, or do you want to ask further?
I think that will be enough, because I think it's I came in after the demise of the Steiner College, the actual activity, and it was my task to officially close it, i.e., do all the bring all the accounting together, bring all the press, everything, bring it to a close so that it could be officially closed, properly closed. I think in the question that I asked and what has been presented is a picture of why it failed. I haven't heard a clear picture in any way, shape, or form. There's all these surmises, and Stegman wanted to do this, and Renee did that, et cetera, et cetera. But again, there is no clarity. What happened? And in my forensic work, what became clear to me was that the people there were not clear of what they wanted and where they wanted to go and how they wanted to do it. They were so focused on what they felt needed to be done, but there was no ground. There was no grounding. The ideas were good and important. The land that they worked on has been very deeply, deeply spiritualized. But they couldn't continue with the work because their feet were simply not on the ground. As Joel mentioned, in terms of his picture was, I think, was very quite adequate. So my take on it was that individuals came with who did not have their feet on the ground. They had a good impulse, a good need, and a good reason for getting started, because this country did need Waldorf school teachers. That was important. But at the same time, that's all they focused on. And when it came to a point where that was no longer a focal point for teacher training, they lost their way. They couldn't adapt. They couldn't see where things were in fact moving. Their time when they were there was important. They were achieving and providing the needs, the service, and the tasks, but they couldn't see the changes that were coming. And because they couldn't see the changes that were coming, they became irrelevant. And here or anywhere in the world, when something becomes irrelevant, they either fight to stay and become very sclerotic, or they just can't hang on anymore.
Chris, could you possibly bring it down to something that you would say they missed?
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Because
I just
with you.
I just want to give it an overall picture.
Yeah.
When I went in, my background, I spent 21 years as a full-time co-worker at the fellowship community in Spring Valley. I worked tremendously or deeply with accounting there from a social point of view, as well as many of the other aspects, the care, the animal husbandry, the machinery, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm deeply steeped in the accounting. And when I went to take a look at what was there, what was left that needed to be brought together in order to close, was an absolute mess. There was the people who were directing that had no idea of appropriate administrative process. None. They depended on experts, which if this organization was in a normal environment, it wouldn't have been a problem. But they were trying to bring to earth something so different that you needed to learn how to translate the ideas and understand the accounting side of things, the basic business, not just the accounting, the basic business needs for an organization to be able to be grounded and to support and move itself forward. And this is what was missing. The basic administrative process and how to translate that, or to try to translate that, into a social process. In the accounting, in the record keeping, just the record keeping of the students, that was an absolute mess. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But it was.
Carl
Because, let me explain exactly what I mean.
Good.
When a student matriculates, they're brought in and information is collected for their basic information. And as they take courses, the records of the teachers need to be taken up. That say, student so-and-so took this course and did well, or didn't do well, or whatever, across the board. Now, for those that were going for the Waldorf teacher training, they did set up what was necessary and required by OSNA in order for the individual to be considered certified by OSNA to be able to teach in a Waldorf school. Anyone that took any other class, the records weren't there, or half-baked, so to speak. So when students who would come later, who were looking for work, and were asked, well, what courses did you take? That was one of my tasks, is to respond to requests by previous alumni, and said, well, I took courses. I took a year course in this subject area, whether it was high school education or whether it was early education, early childhood education. And I would go in and look, and yes, I could find their matriculation, but I couldn't find records for some individuals of any of the courses they took.
Stuart, if I might add something, a thought here to what Chris has brought. Thank you, Chris. And that would be that I think here in the West, of all places, as Stuart was trying to bring, the whole question of dealing with money, the whole question of the economy in the threefolding has to be dealt with here. It's a key part of the America's mission for the evolution of humanity. And I know John Root, who's here, he's done a lot of work in this too. And the other thing is about the Americas, this is where the Vulcans are working. This is the area of technology. And I think Rudolf Steiner College didn't offer anything in how to live in the world in which we're living, how to be Rosicrucians and reach the humanity. So the gesture of one who came out of the Waldorf training was everything to do with technology is evil. Now, I don't know that for a fact, but that was the impression I got from a few graduates. So I think that gesture was something that as a student coming in, they would go, like you said, you don't have your feet on the ground. And I think that's hurt Waldorf education everywhere. So that's my feeling. But back to you, Chris. Thank you for your honest assessment.
I want to just insert one thing with Daryl, who's with us on the phone, and that is, as Daryl knows well, the Iroquois have what they call the three twin principles of the Iroquois Confederation, which is threefolding with its inner dimension. So, for instance, and Daryl, you certainly can elaborate on this. For instance, in my understanding, for the Iroquois, justice was achieved outwardly in the political sphere, what we call the political sphere today, when people became righteous inwardly. Authority, true authority, was established in the cultural sphere, the authority of a true teacher, of a priest, of a conductor who can hold an entire symphony in his hands. Authority was achieved outwardly in the cultural sphere when inner power was arrived at, when spiritual power was arrived at inwardly. That is, one had to have substance to be a true authority. And now to the question of the economy, in my understanding of the Iroquois Confederation, is that health was achieved in the economic sphere. Peace was achieved in the economic sphere for the Iroquois. Peace, a world economy that would work together in peace, when people became healthy inwardly, not dis-ease, not out of balance, not 6 feet off the earth, but balanced and healthy, inwardly led to the goal of the economic sphere outwardly of peace. So before we invite Carl and then to Chris to pick up the thread, Daryl, if you're there and if you can hear us, do you want to offer some words as a member of the Mohawk and Iroquois Confederation and one who has worked very, very, very deeply with these questions?
Stuart, excuse me for interrupting here.
Yep.
I'd like to finish mine before we carry on into another theme
Good.
or another direction.
That's
I
fine.
I just have a couple more sentences and then I'm going to have to go very soon.
Yep, that's fine. And then we can maybe formally close, and then those who want to linger can do so. So go ahead, Chris. Thank you.
That was just one example that I gave. And I found many examples in many different, in all of the areas. So what that additional comment that was made is very true. There has been no real effort to address how to work here with anthroposophical ideas in what is presented. At the fellowship community, there was a tremendous effort by the founder and a couple of the others to how to translate these social ideas into this American soil. I cannot say that we succeeded, but at least we grappled directly with those issues so that it can and is still in existence today. If we look across the board at many of the other anthroposophical initiatives, not too many of them are still around. And again, it's because not understanding that we need to grapple with what exists here in this land, in this geography, and what's presented. And that's all I have to say.
Which is the elemental world as well. So let's do this. We are exactly at the 90-minute mark. Queen Mother, are you with us? Can you hear us? If so, could you give a concluding prayer? And those who wish to stay on informally, we're really at the heart of the matter. And I hope, Daryl, that you will speak as a Iroquois Mohawk brother to the twin principles. But Queen Mother, can you hear us? And if so, would you give us a concluding prayer? Let me just give her a ring. She's being called by every direction. One moment. In this Christmas season, just a moment. Okay, so she's not available at the moment. So I'm going to offer, friends, the verse. I think I'll offer a different verse to conclude formally, and those who wish to stay can do so. And that verse is short. The white race's new sunrise will reveal itself in earthly realms, first when the race's knowing ones feel in themselves the soul's band with the spirit. And when within them would work the experience of the outrage that darkens souls, when they would know the human being through matter sense alone. So once again, I'm going to give it in German and then in English. Die weißen Rasse morgen neues Morgenrot wird in Erdgebiet sich offenbaren, es, wenn die Rasse Wissende erfüllen in sich der Seelenband mit dem Geist und in ihnen wirken wird Empfindung von der Schande, die Seelen schärzt, wenn sie das Menschenwesen durch Materiensinn begreifen wollen. The white race's new sunrise will reveal itself in earthly realms, first when the race's knowing ones experience in themselves the soul's band with the spirit. And when within them would work the experience of the outrage that darkens souls, when they would know the human being through matter sense alone. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Joel. We will continue, but those who are called, who have miles to go before they sleep, hope you can join us tomorrow. We will carry on with this thread tomorrow as well, but thank you all. Daryl, are you there and can you hear us? Are you there, Daryl, and can you hear us? We don't have the connection.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I have unmuted my phone, Stuart. I have listened with compassion for this